My name is Clara. I live in Chicago where the winter wind feels like 1,000 tiny needles against your skin. People here say that if you want to know who is important, you don't look at their face. You look at their coat. I am standing in a cemetery right now. The ground is white with snow. The air is so cold that I can see my own breath. I am wearing a black designer jacket. Cost me $2,000. It is filled with the finest feathers. I don't feel the cold at all. But as I look down at the wooden box being lowered into the frozen earth, I feel a different kind of cold. A cold that no designer jacket can fix. Inside that box is my mother, Rose. 2 weeks ago she was alive. 2 weeks ago I had a choice to make. And I chose myself. To understand why I am crying, you have to understand my life in the city. I work for a big fashion company. In my world, clothes are everything. If you wear cheap clothes, people think you are a failure. I spent years trying to look rich. I wanted everyone to think I was successful. Last month, I received a phone call from my mother. She lived in a small, drafty house in Minnesota. In Minnesota, the winters are even worse than Chicago. Clara, she said. Her voice sounded thin over the phone. My old brown coat. It has a hole in the sleeve. The zipper doesn't work anymore. I tried to fix it, but the wind goes right through it. I am so cold when I walk to the grocery store. I was looking at a magazine at that moment. A magazine showing a new limited edition winter collection. Don't worry, Mom, I told her. Christmas is coming. I will buy you a new coat. Really good one. Something that will keep you warm for years. Oh, thank you, Clara, she whispered. I don't need anything fancy. Just something thick. I trust you. I felt proud. I told my friends at work, I'm getting my mom a great coat for Christmas. A week before Christmas, I went to the luxury mall in downtown Chicago. The lights were bright. Everything smelled like expensive perfume and cinnamon. I walked into a high-end boutique. And then I saw it. It was a midnight black jacket with a fur hood. It was beautiful. It was the kind of jacket that tells the world, I have arrived. I am powerful. I tried it on. It felt like a warm hug. I looked in the mirror and didn't see Clara from a small town. I saw a queen. I looked at the price tag. $2,000. That was exactly the amount of money I had saved for the entire Christmas season. It was the money for my mother's coat, my travel tickets, and the gifts for my coworkers. I stood there for a long time. I thought about my mother in her drafty house, wearing her old brown coat with the broken zipper. Then I looked at myself in the mirror again. I thought, if I wear this to the office party, everyone will finally respect me. My mother? She lives in a small town. Nobody sees her. She doesn't need a designer label. She just needs something heavy. That was the moment I made the mistake that would haunt me forever. I walked out of the luxury boutique with a large, shiny bag. Inside was my $2,000 jacket. I felt like a different person. But as I walked toward the exit of the mall, I saw a department store. It was the kind of store that sold everything: tools, kitchen towels, and cheap clothes. In the back of the store there was a large red bin. A sign above it said, "Clearance all winter wear 70% off." I walked over to the bin. It was filled with coats made of cheap, synthetic materials. I reached in and pulled out a coat. It was a dull gray color. When I touched the fabric, it felt thin. It didn't have real down feathers or high-quality insulation. It felt like paper. I looked at the price tag. $40. A voice in my head whispered, "Clara, this is not enough. Minnesota winters are brutal. Your mother needs something better." But I looked at my shiny boutique bag. I had already spent the money. I couldn't return my jacket. I needed it for the party. I told myself, it's okay. Mom has sweaters. She can wear layers. A coat is just a coat. I bought the $40 gray coat and put it in a plain box. I didn't even buy nice wrapping paper. 2 days later, I drove to Minnesota. As I crossed the state line, the temperature dropped. The sky was a heavy, flat gray. The trees were bare and covered in ice. My car's heater was on full blast and I was wearing my new expensive jacket. I felt warm and toasted. I felt successful. When I pulled into my mother's driveway, I noticed the house looked smaller than I remembered. The white paint was peeling. There was a thick layer of frost on the windows. My mother rose, opened the door before I could even knock. She looked older. Her hair was thinner and her hands were trembling slightly, but her smile was as bright as ever. "Clara, you're home," she cried. She hugged me and for a second I felt the cold air from inside the house. "Mom, why is it so cold in here?" I asked, pulling my jacket tighter around me. "Oh, the furnace is old, dear," she said, waving her hand. "I try not to run it too much. Oil is very expensive this year. But don't worry about me. I have my tea and my blankets." We sat in the kitchen. She had prepared a small meal, chicken soup and homemade bread. He kept touching the sleeve of my new jacket. "This is a beautiful coat, Clara," she said softly. "It looks so thick. You must be very warm in the city." "It's just something I needed for work, Mom," I said quickly. I felt a sharp pinch of guilt in my chest. I reached for the plain box I had brought from the car. "Here, this is for you. Merry Christmas." Her eyes lit up like a child's. She carefully opened the box. She pulled out the $40 gray coat. She held it up. In the dim light of the kitchen, the coat looked even thinner than it had in the store. "Oh, Clara," she whispered. It's wonderful. Thank you." She put it on immediately. I watched her. She zipped it up, but I could see that the coat didn't puff up. It sat flat against her small frame. It provided no shape, no heat. "Is it warm?" I asked. I wanted her to say yes. I needed her to say yes so I could stop feeling bad. "It's from you, so it's the best coat in the world," she said. But then she shivered. It was a small shiver, but I saw it. That night, the temperature fell to 10 degrees below zero. I slept in my old bedroom under 3 heavy quilts. I could hear the wind whistling through the cracks in the window frames. In the middle of the night, I heard a sound from my mother's room. It was a cough. A deep, dry, rattling cough. It didn't stop for a long time. I laid there in the dark, clutching my expensive blankets, and for the first time, the weight of my $2,000 jacket felt like a stone sitting on my heart. The next morning, the sun was bright, but it was a false sun. It gave light but no heat. The ice on the trees didn't melt. I found my mother in the kitchen. She was trying to make coffee, but her hands were shaking so hard that the spoon clattered against the ceramic mug. She was wearing the gray coat I had bought her, the $40 coat. She had a scarf wrapped around her neck, but her face was pale, almost gray like the fabric of the jacket. "Morning, Clara," she rasped. Her voice was nearly gone. "Mom, you look terrible," I said, walking over to her. I touched her forehead. She was burning with a fever, yet she was shivering. "You need to stay in bed." "Why are you wearing the coat inside?" "The house is just a bit chilly today," she whispered. She tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace of pain. "I thought I would walk to the mailbox. I wanted to see if the Christmas cards arrived." "You are not going outside," I snapped. I felt a surge of anger, but I realized I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at myself. Every time I looked at that thin, cheap coat, I saw my own selfishness. I stayed with her all day. I turned the heater up as high as it would go, but the old house couldn't hold the warmth. The wind simply pushed the heat out through the thin walls. My mother spent the afternoon on the sofa, buried under 4 blankets, still wearing that gray coat. She kept saying, "It's such a nice gift, Clara. I feel so lucky." Every time she said the word lucky, I wanted to scream. I went into the hallway and looked at my own jacket hanging on the hook. The black fur on the hood looked rich and thick. It was designed for Arctic temperatures. It was designed to keep a person alive in a blizzard. And there was my mother 20 feet away, shivering in a piece of trash I had pulled from a discount bin. By the evening, the rattling in her chest became a wet, heavy sound. She couldn't finish her tea. She couldn't even keep her eyes open. I think I need to lie down, honey," she said. I helped her to her room. As she walked, she leaned heavily on my shoulder. She felt as light as a bird, as if the cold was slowly evaporating her. I tucked her in and stayed by her side until she fell into a fitful sleep. I sat in the living room alone. The silence of the Minnesota woods was deafening. I took out my phone and looked at the photos from my office party the week before. There I was, standing with a glass of champagne, wearing my $2,000 jacket. I looked beautiful. I looked successful. Everyone had complimented me. Now, looking at that photo, I didn't see a successful woman. I saw a fraud. I saw a girl who had traded her mother's health for a few hours of vanity. The next morning, my mother didn't wake up. I tried to shake her shoulder, but she was unresponsive. Her breathing was shallow and fast. I panicked. I called for an ambulance, my voice shaking as I gave our address to the operator. While I waited for the sirens, I grabbed her gray coat from the chair to wrap it around her, thinking it would help. But as I picked it up, I felt how light it was. It felt like nothing. It was just plastic and cheap thread. It was a lie in the shape of a coat. The paramedics arrived quickly. They worked with practiced cold efficiency. They loaded her onto a stretcher. "She has severe pneumonia," one of the men told me. He looked at the gray coat lying on the floor. He picked it up and handed it to me. "She should have been wearing something much warmer than this. This isn't a winter coat. This is a light spring jacket." I couldn't speak. I just watched them slide her into the back of the ambulance. I followed them to the hospital in my car, driving through the blinding white snow, wearing my expensive, warm black jacket, feeling like the coldest person on earth. The hospital was a place of white walls and cold lights. It smelled of chemicals and fear. I sat in the waiting room for 12 hours. My expensive black jacket was still on my shoulders, but I felt like I was freezing. The nurses walked past me, their shoes making a soft clicking sound on the floor. Every time a door opened, my heart jumped. I kept praying, "Please let her be okay. I will buy her 10 coats. I will buy her the best house. Just let her wake up." But the universe doesn't always listen to bargains. At 4 o'clock in the morning, a doctor walked toward me. He didn't have to say anything. I saw it in his eyes, that heavy, tired look of someone who has to deliver bad news. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said softly. Her body was too weak. The pneumonia moved too fast. We did everything we could, but the cold had already done too much damage. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry at first. I just felt empty, like someone had reached inside me and pulled out my soul. I walked into her room to say goodbye. She looked so small on the high hospital bed. Her hands, the hands that had held mine when I was a child, were cold and still. I looked at the chair in the corner. My gray $40 coat was sitting there, folded neatly. Looked like a piece of trash in that clean, professional room. I picked it up and held it to my face. It didn't smell like my mother. It just smelled like a factory. The next few days were a blur of paperwork and silence. I arranged the funeral. I stood in the snow wearing my $2,000 jacket and watched them lower her into the ground. My friends from Chicago called me. They said, "Clara, we missed you at the New Year's party. You looked so great in that new jacket on Instagram." I deleted the app. I didn't want to see the jacket. I didn't want to see the city. After the funeral, I went back to my mother's house one last time to pack her things. The house was even colder now. The silence was heavy. I walked through the kitchen, past the half-empty box of tea and the crust of bread that was now hard and dry. I went into her bedroom. It was a simple room with a small bed and a wooden wardrobe. I started putting her clothes into a suitcase. I found her old sweaters, her worn-out shoes, and the brown coat with the broken zipper. I held that old brown coat and finally I started to cry. I cried until my chest hurt. Then I noticed something. There was a small high cupboard at the very top of the wardrobe. It was a place where she kept things she didn't use every day. I dragged a chair over and climbed up. I reached into the dark corner of the cupboard and felt something smooth. It was a large, heavy box. It was wrapped in beautiful gold paper with a red ribbon. There was a small card attached to the ribbon. It was written in my mother's shaky, elegant handwriting. It said, "For my dearest Clara. You work so hard in the big city. I want you to always be warm and always feel proud. Merry Christmas, my beautiful daughter. Love, Mom." My hands were shaking as I pulled the ribbon. I opened the gold box. I gasped. My breath stopped in my throat. Inside the box, wrapped in soft white tissue paper, was a brand new, beautiful, heavy wool coat. It was a deep, rich red color, the color of a rose. It had silver buttons and a thick, warm lining. It was a high-end designer coat. I looked at the receipt that was tucked into the pocket. The date on the receipt was from 2 months ago. The price was $1,500. My mother, who lived in a house with a broken furnace, who ate simple soup every day, and who wore a coat with a hole in the sleeve, had saved her money for 3 years. She had sacrificed everything, her comfort, her warmth, her health, to buy me a coat that would make me look successful. While I was in a luxury boutique in Chicago choosing to buy myself a jacket and giving her a $40 piece of cloth, she was sitting in the cold, dreaming of keeping me warm. I fell to my knees on the cold floor, clutching the red coat to my chest. The silence of the house was gone. Now all I could hear was the sound of my own heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. I stayed in my mother's house for 1 more week. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't check my emails. I just sat in her chair, wrapped in the red wool coat she had bought for me. It was the warmest thing I had ever felt, but it couldn't stop the shivering deep inside my bones. I looked at my own $2,000 black jacket hanging by the door. It looked ugly to me now. It looked like a monument to my own vanity. Every time I looked at it, I saw the red clearance bin at the department store. I saw the $40 price tag. I saw my mother's shaking hands. I realized that pride is a very expensive thing. It doesn't just cost money, it costs people, costs moments, costs lives. When I finally drove back to Chicago, the city felt different. The tall buildings didn't look like symbols of success anymore. They looked like giant tombstones. I went back to my office. My boss looked at me and smiled. "Clara, good to have you back," he said. He looked at the red coat I was wearing. "Is that a new piece? The color is striking. Very high-end. You certainly have a taste for the finer things." I looked him in the eyes and said, "This coat was bought with 3 years of hunger and cold. You couldn't afford it." He looked confused, but I didn't explain. I walked to my desk, packed my things in a small box and walked out. I quit my job that day. I realized I couldn't spend another minute selling status to people who already had too much, while people like my mother were shivering in the dark. I sold my expensive apartment. I sold my designer shoes and my luxury bags. I kept only one thing from my old life, the black jacket. But I didn't keep it to wear it. I drove to a local shelter in the coldest part of Chicago. It was a place for women who had nowhere to go. I walked inside and saw an elderly woman sitting on a plastic chair. She was wearing a thin, torn sweater. She was shivering. I walked up to her and handed her the $2,000 black jacket. "Here," I said. "This will keep you warm. It's the best money can buy." The woman looked at the jacket, then at me. But this is so expensive, she whispered. Why are you giving it to me? Because I learned that a coat is only worth something if it actually keeps someone warm, I replied. Otherwise, it's just a heavy weight. I kept the red coat. I wear it every day now. I moved back to Minnesota into a small house not far from where my mother lived. I work at a local school now. My life is quiet. Some people in the city think I am a failure. They think I lost my way. But every morning when I put on that red coat, I feel my mother's arms around me. I feel her love, her sacrifice, and her forgiveness. I learned a lesson that cost me everything. Success is not about what you wear on your back. It is about who you carry in your heart. I have the most expensive coat in the world, not because of the price tag, but because of the love that paid for it. The wind still blows hard in the winter. The snow still piles up against the windows. But I am not cold anymore. My mother's love is the only furnace I will ever need. My name is Clara. And I finally know what it means to be truly rich.